Thank you all for joining us tonight at Japan Society for Where They Create Japan. So often, buildings, history, and culture are described as the essence of a city, the things that define it. But I would argue that it's the people, the creatives, that really form the soul of a particular place. Tonight, I'm honored to introduce Paul Barbera, creator of the book Where They Create Japan. Tonight, we'll begin with a presentation by the photographer, followed by a panel discussion featuring leading creatives, all of whom Paul has shot. Hiroko Takahashi, Matthew Waldman, Masashi Kawamura, and Qanta Shimizu. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion and an audience Q&A. Paul Barbera graduated from Australia's Victorian College of Arts in 1994 and has traveled the world with his photography since then. His photos have been featured in Vogue Living, Elle Decor, Martha Stewart, and other high-end publications. He has also been featured in the New York Times, the Paris Review, and Forbes. His new book, Where They Create Japan, gives a behind-the-scenes look at the studios of some of Japan's top creatives, many of which we will be getting to see today. As I mentioned, our panelists today are Hiroko Takahashi, artist and innovation specialist Matthew Waldman, and Masashi Kawamura and Qanta Shimizu of the New York and Tokyo-based Creative Lab Party. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paul Barbera to the stage.
Quick thank you to Japan Society for hosting tonight. And my name is Paul, obviously, and I'm the author of Where They Create. And a quick thank you to also to Matthew and Hiroko, who came all the way out from Tokyo and just arrived only a couple hours ago. And we have Party, which are in the back and are going to come out soon. And a quick little behind the scenes, Jono and Queenie, who helped me actually make this happen tonight. So I hope to give you some insights into the making of the book and I guess visiting studios. So my first, by the way, that's the cover, that's the book. Probably all saw it at the front. So how did Where They Create begin? In 2009, I was visiting a friend in Rome, and he needed some help building a website, so we did that. And he asked for me to shoot his studio, which I did. And shooting, I guess, his space and his interior, I often shot artists' spaces for probably 3 or 4 or 5 years before that. So it was only natural for me to kind of shoot his space. And as I'm shooting his space and putting together this website, I had this little moment where I realized I had this kind of archive of studios, and I thought, why not make it a project? And with a friend of mine who happened to be visiting the studio at the same time, Michael Nicolacci, we came up with the name Where They Create. And I think it probably took me about a day, and I came up with built the site. I guess it's also fair to say that this is a moment in time when you could actually start building your own website without too much programming skills at all. So I travel a lot with my work as a photographer, so I was able to cover a lot of ground. So I'd travel for an assignment, look up an artist or creative, or be introduced to somebody, and go off and document them. So I already had an archive, plus I traveled a lot, so very quickly it garnered a small following and got some attention. So I'm going to fast forward to 2017. This is the current iteration of the website, 8 years on, about 200 studios photographed, almost 30 cities. We've added a little bit of a Q&A, so every story has just a couple of questions we ask about the space and funny things we'd find in the space. And it's been a lot of fun. So to jump back now to 2011, so how did Where They Create become a book? I was in photographing through a friend of a friend, Frame Publishers, shooting their office for Where They Create. And Robert, the editor-in-chief, asked me what I'm doing with the project. You know, what do I expect it to be one day? And I said, well, you know, like all photographers, it would be amazing if it could be a book one day. And he said, well, we love it, and we'd love to publish it, which is probably the quickest book pitch and deal I've ever got, but it was very quick. And so we sort of set off to do the book, and it covers a wide variety of genres and locations. So Acne, Opening Ceremony, Fantastic Man, painter Jeremiah Goodman, and it became actually Frame's best-selling book in the States. So that brings me to, I guess, why we're here tonight, which is what was the inspiration for Where They Create Japan. 2014, I was in Hiroshima for a client photographing a high-end woodworking factory. And it was just such a pleasure running around this factory for 10 days, documenting all the work that was going on. I was just, I guess, mesmerized with the craftsmanship, attention to detail, and the work ethic that was going on in this kind of family-run business. And I was, while I was doing it, I was already thinking, I need to come back and make a book. And so when I returned back to New York with my partner Queenie, we set off to write a proposal. But what was important was that we weren't just doing another book, that it could be a series, could be more than just like one book on Japan, but lead into other things. So we settled on the idea that it should be based around geographical locations. And of course, I'm going to start with my favorite country, which is Japan, and with all that energy that I had. And Frame, lucky enough, agreed. And in some ways also, I was also using it as an excuse to travel back to Japan and try to understand Japan. And it was sort of a self-funded sabbatical of such. So the making of the book. So with Frame on board, they introduced me to their local, design writer correspondent, Kanae Hasegawa. And she had a large collection, or a lot of friends actually, a lot of people she knew within the architecture and design world. But we wanted to make sure that it was a diverse book, ranging not just from architecture and design. So we put together a big crazy list of about 300 names, and we had to vet it down to about 32, which of course is quite difficult to go through that process. And we had 4 or 5 of us going through that vetting process. And I had a really big concern, and that was that, in my experience anyway, I feel like sometimes Japanese can be quite private. Very much orientated towards the end product, not so much the process. So I was worried that maybe nobody would even agree to let me shoot their studio. But I guess we're here tonight, so obviously people gave me access, so it was fine. And at the end, it's all about access. That's the hardest thing to, I guess, convince people to let you in and reveal their world to you, where they create. So the reason I'm showing this particular image is that there's 4 studios here, and each one of them had never really had their studio spaces photographed before. It's the first time that they opened up to the public. So it was quite an honor. It's always quite an honor to be let into people's spaces, and you want to always make sure you're doing it justice. So that leads me to Tadao Ando. So, how do you get famed architect to be in your book or project? So, Kanae didn't know him or know anyone who knew him. Frame didn't have any contact with him. We had no way of actually accessing him. And on the website, there's only a fax number and it only accepts faxes and handwritten letters. So I've not done either of those for probably 15, 20 years. So I found some website that you could send a fax through. I paid $2 through PayPal. It told me it's sent. I thought, okay, that was a fun exercise. I guess we should try to either forget about it or find someone who actually knows him. Well, 4 days later, I received this. Thank you for your kind fax of February 4th, addressed to Mr. Tadao Ando. In regards to your new book, Where They Create Japan by Frame Publishers, he is interested in the book and has accepted to be photographed by you at our studio in Osaka in March or April 2016. And this was a beautiful moment just because it meant that we were kind of validated in doing the book and we knew we were on the right track. In contrast, Mariko Mori, we had her on a list, but we had a lot of trouble trying to get a hold of her. And I ended up going along to her exhibition and met her gallerist and explained what we were doing. And of course, before we knew it, he agreed and he was quite happy to introduce us. And he organised for us to shoot her at her tea house. Now, her studio is actually in London, and I would have loved to have gone over to see it, but it just logistically wasn't going to work out. So we stayed, I agreed and went to her tea house to photograph her there. And that was a nice moment to be able to have her in it. The only thing is, I guess in many ways I have my own cliches about what a studio should be and how it should look. And a tea house and a minimalist space. I often tell creatives when I go to turn up, you please leave the space as it is. I will find the peace and order. Well, this was completely peaceful and completely ordered. And I was a bit doubtful actually at the beginning when I was photographing it, but in retrospect and once I see it in the book, it really adds a nice counterpoint and contrast to the whole book, because I think all creatives work in all manner of space, and this is a really nice example of something very different. So Shinji Omaki. Sometimes you get to know someone actually quite well, and they really open up their whole world to you. Shinji Omaki, this is actually at Tokyo University, where he's a professor, and this is his atelier. And we spent a day running around, showing me some installations he had in the city of Tokyo. And then he said to me, look, I actually have another studio down where I live, 2 hours south from Tokyo. Maybe you should come down and I can show you my other studio. I have a home studio and a studio on the water in a port. So I came down, and we had been talking about food the day before, and he heard that I love chawanmushi, so he had his wife, who was a cook, to make me some chawanmushi. And this is his father-in-law, who's a fourth-generation tuna trader and a collector of samurai swords. And it was quite a ritual, actually. It was a good hour to unwrap them and then present them to me. And I was actually, obviously, you can see here, I was holding one. But the amazing thing about these, well, this particular sword that I'm holding is 500 years old. And when you're holding a blade that old, it's very important that you're not putting your breath or any saliva or anything onto it, because the moisture can damage the blade. So when you're holding it, you have to actually not talk at all. And I had Shinji Omaki saying, "Shh, stop talking." But it was a cathartic experience holding that blade. So I'm going to end where I actually begun. This was the very first studio visit, which is famed architect Ken Gakuma. He's currently working on the Olympic Stadium for 2020 Tokyo Olympics. And he was gracious enough to find some time in his crazy schedule. I think he has more than 100 people working for him. And he gave me 10 minutes at 10 p.m. I'll take it. I'll take whatever he's going to give me. That's fine. 10 minutes is plenty. I actually only spend about an hour, to be honest, on every studio. So 10 minutes is actually quite okay. The problem is, you probably could tell by all the other photos, nothing is shot at night or under artificial light. I only work under daylight. But okay, another little compromise, but I'll take it. That's okay. I also didn't want to miss the opportunity, and he was the first one off the bat. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get there a couple of days before to climatize and just get myself right. So I booked my flights, and of course I leave 2 days early, but we hit a storm in Dallas. I get rerouted to LA. What should have been 19 hours ended up being 40 hours. So I arrived, I guess, in time. I made it. It wasn't that I wasn't late, but I was very flustered and totally jet lagged. I get up, I do my portraits, I'm happy with what we've done. I thank Mr. Ken Gakuma, and he says, please join me for a coffee, which is like, oh, that's very nice. Okay, I'm not going to say no. So I sit down to have a coffee with Ken Gakuma. I'm not quite sure what I want to talk about. I'm not really ready for it. And I said, look, actually, I've just been reading a book called Shinto, The Way Home, because I think if I understand the belief system of a country, I can understand its people. But I'm really confused. I'm really struggling with all the concepts. And he said something really nice to me, which has stuck with me till now, and that is, he said, Paul, I am a professor of architecture. I work with the theme of Shinto in my work. I'm also Japanese, and I also find it very confusing and very, very difficult, and which was beautiful. And then he said, it's also okay not knowing. And that was, I thought, that made me feel much better about trying to learn it myself. And so I want to finish by saying this, that, 20,000 images, which is about what I shot to edit it down to the book. And 2 months in Japan, I realized also it's okay not knowing. Thank you.
こんばんは、高橋ひろ子です。
Good evening, I'm Hiroko Takahashi.
私は東京でアーティストとして活動しています。
I work in Tokyo as an artist.
固定観念を覆し、世の中の人々に考えるきっかけを与えたいという思いで活動しています。
I work to overcome people's stereotypes and preconceptions and to force people around the world to rethink their value systems.
私の表現の特徴としては、円と直線のみでパターンを作って、それらでものづくりをしています。
My work is distinguished by a certain kind of expression by which I use only circles and straight lines in my patterns.
主に表現媒体は着物です。
And I mainly work using kimonos.
これは今やっている展覧会、東京でやっている展覧会の写真です。
This is a picture of a current exhibition of mine in Tokyo.
写真の作品とともにこのようなマネキンの作品も発表しているんですけれども、
Along with photographs, I also have mannequins as part of the works that I do.
日本語で言うと仁王立ちという男性的な立ち方をしているのが特徴です。
These are characterized by something called nyodachi, which is a very masculine way of standing in an imposing stance with the feet placed apart.
日本では私たち女性は女性らしく、着物を着たら女性らしく足は内股に閉じて歩きなさいと言われるんですけれども、あえてこのような立ち方をすることで世の中のこうしなければいけないというようなそういう固定観念や慣習のようなものに対してのアンチテーゼとしてメッセージを込めてこのような作品を発表しています。
As Japanese women, we were told to wear kimonos a certain way, to keep our feet together, and to walk a certain way. I actually did this purposely to overcome that previous way of thinking and to have people throughout the world think about, again, their preconceptions and their customs. I'm trying to send a message of rethinking these ideas.
円と直線のパターンを使ってさまざまなデザインのお仕事もさせていただいています。
I also do work involving various designs with these circular and lined patterns.
この写真だけ入ってたんですけれども、これはフェンディのバッグをデザインした時のものです。
This picture shows a Fendi bag that I designed.
これはポールが撮影してくださった写真ですね。
This is a picture from Paul's work.
今回表紙になっています。
And it is the cover.
大変光栄です。
And I'm very honored that he selected it to be in such a prominent place.
ポールの写真を見ると私とは全く違った視点を持っていて、すごく私のスタジオをまた新しい視点で捉えることができて大変面白い写真集になっています。ぜひご覧ください。
I'd love for you to check out Paul's book because it offered a chance for me to look at this from a different point of view, to see my own studio from someone else's point of view. It came out very interesting.
他にもいろいろ作品があるんですけれども、ぜひホームページをご覧いただければと思います。以上です。ありがとうございます。
I have many different works, so if you have a chance, please take a look at my homepage. Thank you very much.
I'm Matthew Waldman. I guess I should go to my slide here, right? Oh, that's my name. And my work mainly concerns what is a big word, techno-progressivism, and also universal language. All of the projects I do, whether it's expressed in physical product or in linguistic exercises or graphic design, is about communicating concepts without having to explain them and without language so that they transcend geopolitical borders. And the thing I'm most famous for is a line of accessories called Nuka. It's a futurist fashion brand. And when I was still doing that, that's when he came to my studio, which is actually, I did not clean up. I followed his advice, and it was quite messy, so it's going to look quite different than the other studios that you see. I also want to mention that how wonderful and global this endeavor is. The way I met Paul was via a Finnish creative genius, and they shared a studio in 2000 in Amsterdam. So it goes from Amsterdam to New Amsterdam, which is New York, and then to Tokyo, and back here in New York, which is really wonderful, and it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. So there's I don't know, probably be better if Paul described these photos here. But for my studio space, I like to have a space that has a lot of visual stimulation and a lot of things to touch and books to look at. It's also about like one's business. Do you have clients come to your studio or not? And I don't. Sometimes I do. So my studio is really more about me and my stuff and things that I find to be inspired. Bicycles, a robot that followed me home from Japan. Lots of plants, mainly cacti. And that's that's me sketching. See, I'm kind of embarrassed how messy some of these photos are. But I'm actually, Nuka has unfortunately filed for bankruptcy, so I am studioless, had to put everything into storage. It's the first time in, 30 years I haven't had a studio, first time I've ever put things in storage. So it's a whole new world for me, and I'm actually designing now out of my apartment, which is a very scary thing. It's like a new environment, but I'm gonna show you two products that I've actually done that debuted at the gift show. You can go see it, I think tomorrow's the last day. For some Japanese manufacturers, there's a vase made out of cedar wood and also some ceramics with some very interesting glazes. I've also worked with some traditional, what I'm doing is bringing a new way of thinking to old ways of manufacturing. How successful it is remains to be seen, but that's the latest project that I've been working on. And I'm going to keep it brief so that we have more time for Q&A and panel discussions. And now we can bring up the wonderful talents of Party.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Masa, and this is
Qanta
from a company
Party.
called Party. And we're sort of like a creative lab design tech studio, both working in Tokyo and New York. And yeah, we love kind of inventing new combinations of storytelling, design, and technologies. We work for big brands like Google. We also create our own products. We've recently sort of helped redesign or design a new airport terminal for Narita. The Terminal 3 was designed by us. We have those running tracks going across the whole airport there. As you can see, we kind of like to do everything kind of humorously. We love comedy. We like things that makes people smile. And I've done a lot of music videos. And again, those things on the right is more of our own products. He's got one in his hands called the piggyback driver, which allows kids to control your dad. So kid goes here,
Yeah, the kid
steers.
goes here and control the handle and
We couldn't bring his son today, but you kind of get what it means. So a lot of fun, interesting gadgets and design work for ourselves and for our clients. And we're really happy that Paul reached out to us because he mentioned like Japan really cares about the output more than the process. But we really pride ourselves to really be open about the process because creative process and the tools really dictate the certain outputs.
I think so. Process will work very effective on the result.
So this is Tokyo office. As you can see, we purposely chosen like a very blurred one out of Paul's stuff because it's very messy.
This is Tokyo.
This is more Tokyo office. I was kind
Located
of
in Daikanyama.
Dakayama. And we started more doing like filmic work in Japan, so we have an office space, but we don't have a maker's space, but more of a filming studio in the middle of Dakayama, which is kind of rare. So we shoot most of our music videos and the filmic products there. And in comparison, this is New York. We got about 10 people.
At that time, you were out.
I was
from the
away,
office,
yes,
and
but you
so
can see
I forgot
Qanta
to
there.
clean up. Sorry.
Yes, it's nice and messier. We call it organized chaos, but really helps to have all the tools and everything. We like it dirty because we don't become too precious about the space. We love to make everything dirty. We solder things, we build things in our studio. So it really helps to be more free, in terms of, oh my God, can we just spray? Yeah, just use the corner of the room and we're fine. Kind of style, and I hope that kind of shows in some of the weird things that we create. And this is it's a sexy photo.
I've never seen this one.
It looks really nice, dude.
Oh, yeah.
You were a little slimmer back then.
Yeah, actually,
So,
I went to Japan and got a weight.
Yes, he just came back like 2 days
Yeah.
ago. So excuse us for that. That was like a 3D printed figure of you and stuff, and that's the Tokyo office. So, and I don't know if this really describes us quite well, but that's us. And I guess we move on to the panel discussion after this.
Yeah, so special part is we are having 2 offices in Tokyo and New York City.
Yeah, so we were looking. I think we got double featured in
Yes.
this.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so thank you.
All right, so now that we've had a chance to meet our panelists, today we're going to have a panel discussion up here and then pass it to you, the audience. So be sure to be thinking of some things that you'd like to ask our panelists. The first thing that I'm really curious about is the studio can be such a private place. It's where you're able to think and work. Why did you decide to share that with Paul? What made you decide to open your door? And the second part is, were you surprised by anything you learned when you saw the photos? And this question's for everyone.
Well, I know I am very messy, but I'm always surprised when I see how messy I am. I don't know if I'm being too hard on myself, but when I look at the photos, I was like, oh my God, my studio is so messy. So that was my initial.
I didn't do a good job of romanticizing it at all then. You should have looked at it and thought, oh, look, actually it looks a lot less messy than I remember.
I mean, it's nice that it's captured for posterity, but it's also a studio like Kawamura-san said, is like you have to. It can't be precious. I'm constantly spray painting, sanding, cutting, reading, napping, eating. So it makes sense that it's messy.
Reflects you.
Yeah. So I guess I can't complain.
I think we felt the same way as how Matt described it too. But we really had nothing to hide. That's one thing. It's really rare because I personally love checking out other people's studio. Animator studio, like technologist studio, painter studio. Everything's all different. And then there's also like, I love kind of watching out for the secret sauce or like the mysteries behind how can you make all these amazing work? And then always there's clues, in the tools they use and where they work. So, I'm just naturally fascinated about that. So I felt like, that since I've been stealing a lot from other people, maybe it's a time to open up. Show it to the other people. I don't know if there's any hint in our places, but, it was really an interesting experience. Also, it really looks beautiful on picture. So we were surprised at that. And also just kind of seeing the photos and the difference between the Tokyo office now and how we're operating in New York gives us a nice kind of contrast in the types of work that we do. Again, we felt nothing's really changed, but Japan's sort of doing more of the branding work and more things on screens. So less, I guess, messiness in terms of circuit boards and tools and stuff like that. Versus New York, we do a lot more on the maker side of things. So. We do a lot of tinkering, and I think it comes through,
Yeah, in your case it does. In your studio in the New York office, I think you can see the relationship between the space and what you do, but not always, actually. Sometimes you go to a space and I think, like this is just not at all what I expected to see. Nendo was one of those spaces. It was very minimal, and I love his work, Akisato. And it wasn't at all a space that I would have thought, so much incredible work is coming out of. Very controlled. Yeah.
Interesting.
Actually, for me, I don't like this order because he just
That's everything.
Well,
he just explained everything in his fluent English, and so I don't have so much to talk about this. But as he said, it's almost the same thing. Yeah,
Oh, we should switch places.
That's okay. That's okay. This is my kind of struggling, and so I need to struggle in this. I need to survive in this city. So, yeah. So it's the same, and the process is totally connected and directly connected with the result and the output, and so we're prioritizing how we create. So, we believe that kind of process of making will be reflected on the result and the awesome result. And so that, yeah, as he said, so.
Yeah, a little support, but he's our CTO, and we're like co-founders of the company, and he's like in charge of like pushing forward, bringing in the right tools and making an environment. So, you'll be surprised. We have a little newer corner with a lot more like maker space that's dedicated to it and things, and he's really like the believer that we need to think with our hands and make things.
Yeah, actually, I'm such a, how can I say, autistic guy, and so very kind of addicted to making and focusing on making, and so it can be messy, but this might be reflecting my, how can I say, character as a creator.
It's part of the process.
I think so.
If it's any consolation, a messy space is a great space to photograph. It gives me so much opportunity to find little nooks and crannies, and it's often very difficult to really communicate this to people when going in to shoot, to leave the space as it is. And trust me, I'll make it look okay. So Unreal, I've shot them twice. They're in the current book, and I shot them before. And I turned up to photograph them. And there's always something a bit lost in translation when I'm in Japan. And I don't know if they really got my memo about not cleaning up, but we got there a little early. And I knocked on the door, and they said hello, and they closed the door. And then I could hear them cleaning like crazy. And I'm like, I turned to my partner, Queen, I said, they're going to ruin it. I want to get in there now. And I just thought, what's the etiquette here? She said, I don't know. I just don't know what. So I just let them clean. And I went in. Actually, it wasn't too bad. They didn't put away everything. So it was an okay story. But then I found where they hid everything. They threw everything in the back into like a storeroom. And I kind of, at a certain point when I was sort of comfortable in there and now comfortable with me being in there, I kind of pried it open and took some snaps of the store, and they're like, I got a nice shot.
Yeah, but I don't want to show this book to my wife.
It's funny. I used to be an editor at Dwell, and what we would always say to people before our photographers would come is, imagine your very good friend is coming over for lunch. So it's like every day, but a little nicer, but not totally formal, not totally artificial. So then I'd like to ask you, you noted in your presentation that seeing your studio in the book gave you a different perspective. Could you tell me about that? What did you notice, or what surprised you seeing those photos like that?
私は自分の生きている姿が全て表現活動だと思っているので、スタジオを常に公開している状態、ガラス張りのスタジオで、ショップとしても週末オープンしているので、もう私の活動は誰にでも見られてもいつでも誰に見られてもいいっていうふうに思っているんですね。はい。
So I consider the way I live my life part of my activities and my way of expressing myself. My studio is actually, it has glass, so anyone can come in and see what I'm doing. And I leave it open on weekends, so my activities and what I do are always open to anyone, anytime.
ポールが来た時は実はすごく綺麗になってたんですけど、ポールはそれが嫌いだったみたいで。
However, I actually had it looking pretty nice when Paul came, even though I know he doesn't like that very much.
すっごくめちゃくちゃな時もあります。
There's times when it's really horrendous.
でもそうやってものを作っている、私もいろいろな全国日本の職人さんといろいろなものづくりをしているんですけれども、ものを作っている人間がどういう姿でものを作っているかということを、見てもらうことによって、ものづくりをしている人たち、ものの背景の部分にまで思いを巡らせてもらえるんじゃないかと思って公開しています。
So in terms of making things, I actually travel all across the country throughout Japan and work with different craftspeople. It's interesting to see how people make things, the process they're going through. And via viewing this, you actually get to see the person's background, their way of doing things. So that's part of my philosophy of why I leave my studio open as well.
なので、外から見る人が私のスタジオのどういうところを見たいのかなっていうのが、ポールの写真 から読み取れたというか、そういう部分ですかね。
And what I was able to gain from Paul's pictures, it was a sense of what people are wanting to see from the outside when they look at my studio. That was a different perspective.
靴の写真があったのがびっくりしました。靴、shoes.
Oh, there was a picture of shoes, which surprised me.
Well, and that brings me to another question. Your studio is very interesting because it's not just a workplace. It's also your home. I believe the showroom is there as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the different functions that come together in this place and how they influence each other and your way of life?
本当はこうさらけ出すのってすごく恥ずかしかったりもするんですけど、でも本当にそれも先ほども言ったように自分の表現活動なので、自宅も見学したいっていう方がいれば3フロアある最上階が自宅なんですけれども、そこも公開しています。
Actually, when you're exposing yourself, there's an aspect of it that can be pretty embarrassing. But as I said earlier, I consider exposing myself and my life as part of my activities, part of my expression. So if people want to come and see me at my home, I do welcome that. It's a 3-floor house, and they're actually welcome to come up to the top floor.
ポールが2回目に来た時に改装をしてたんですけれども、住めるように改装して、キッチンがあって、そのままその高さにそのままバスタブがついているっていう状態なんですね、今。
So when Paul came to visit for the second time, I was actually in the process of renovating my home to make it more livable. And at the same height of where the kitchen was, there was actually a bathtub in that place.
で、周りにすごいたくさんの植物があって、南の国の植物がジャングルみたいにあるんですけど、そこでそのオープンな空間でお風呂に入ってます。
There were many plants from different southern areas. A lot of jungle vegetation was surrounding it, and this is a large open space, which is where we take our baths.
特に日本だとそういうオープンなバスルームってないと思うので、見た方はみんな日本の人以外の国の人が来ても皆さん驚くし、でもそういうことが考えるきっかけになるというか、もしかしたら固定観念を覆すことにもなるのかなと思っています。
Especially in Japan, it's quite rare to have such an open space for where your bathtub is going to be. And even for visitors who come from other countries, not just Japanese, they're quite surprised to see that that is how I live. But again, this is part of my philosophy of giving people a chance to rethink their preconceived notions.
Yeah, and so something that's really clear in the book, and I hope you'll all get the chance to get the book and see this, is it starts off with a series of introductions, and each one features someone who has kind of cross-cultural connections. Either they're born in Japan and had a career in Europe, or have worked, I guess, all around the world. Now, you guys specifically, Matthew, you've had quite a bit of experience in both Japan, being from New York originally, and then also Party has offices in both Tokyo and New York. I'm wondering, how does that international experience influence you? Do you find you work or think differently in different spaces, or does it influence your work in a different way?
I think it's, I don't know how you feel, but I think when you start out, you think it's going to be very different. But then you realize that a lot of the work that comes from Japan that is well known is often produced by foreign designers. You know, like there's a lot of people think that, oh my God, the Shiseido packages and bottles, they're gorgeous. And they're all done by a French designer. And then, you know, people say, oh, the Issey Miyake stuff is gorgeous. And a lot of that package design is done by Karim Rashid here in New York. So you realize very quickly that there's a global design scene, and how each geography influences that is very important. But when you start going back and forth, it gets so hard to separate, like what is influencing what. Because my very first experience as a professional designer was in Tokyo. You know, I dropped out of school and moved to Tokyo. So my culture shock was the reverse. It was getting used to how to work in New York. And I've been here a long time, and I don't think I've ever gotten used to it, to be quite honest.
What's the difference for you?
It's a lot of different things. I mean, it's not so much the studio culture, it's about the human culture. Okay. So when you're a young designer in Tokyo, I was working for big ad agencies, and I got a job at a smaller agency, which was much better. And if you could tell I'm super talented, and I was super talented even when I was young. But when you're young, I mean, they say in Japanese, deru kugi ga utaeru. And it's, is that the correct saying?
Yes, it
yes.
is.
So if you stand out, you get hammered down. And I found it very difficult to work as a designer, as a young designer there.
Wow.
So these types of cultural things really affected me personally, and it probably impacted my work. But how it influenced the way the work looks, it's going to be very hard for me to say. Someone like a good journalist like you would have to analyze it for me. But then when you go back and forth enough, and I've had offices in Tokyo for Nuka. We had a wonderful Tokyo office that was in a beautiful house near the Aoyama Bochi, and the spaces were very different, and it just gets to be a blur. Like you just can't. New York and Tokyo are so different, but they're so connected. It's a really amazing. And it's like I like to say when people say, "Oh, Japanese is so difficult." I'm like, no, it's very complicated. It's not difficult. So my relationship to the two cultures is complicated, but I don't think it's too complicated for me to answer in a straight manner. I just gave you a very Japanese answer in English. I didn't say anything. I apologize.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
Masa and Qanta, I'm wondering how would you describe this actively working in both places with teams split between the two?
Well, I mean, I think it's almost like taking the best of both worlds, and we get that liberty since we do have offices, real physical offices in two locations, and that's what we kind of intended to do from the beginning. Like, there's amazing Japanese design aesthetics that we want to tap into, but also we really want that sort of global reach, and also like the audience that would really share and love the type of work that lives in New York as well. So. And also like great coders and artists and musicians, also like the fashion and everything is here. So, finding ways to like, import, export from both worlds is sort of our ambition. And in order to do that, we were trying to do it just out of the Tokyo office for a while, but I was actually working and living here in New York before, I started Party. So, it was kind of a logical decision to make. Hey, well, we probably want some sort of satellite or a physical entity outside of Japan in order to kind of break through a way. Japan is awesome, but it's also very close, and the whole deruku ga utareru kind of philosophy sort of is there. You can't really do anything too different, or you get like slammed down, and it's really hard market as well. So,
That's true of advertising as well?
Oh, yes, yeah, definitely.
But the thing about advertising that's interesting, and we had a conversation about this, is people think Japanese advertising is amazing, but every ad agency has a team just for international competitions. So what you see at Cannes and what you see in the annuals is not what you see when you're watching TV in Japan. So there's a disconnect.
Completely. And also we call it ochanoma, which means living room. But the audience is very like unique and likes a certain style of communication. So it's all about celebrities, lots of like subtitling and things going on, which is a very unique aesthetic. And some people like that. But it's really hard to do anything super different from that, aside from ones that they really want to challenge Cannes and things like that. So again, interesting market, lots of talented people, but it's hard to really penetrate through the barriers of Japan. And if you really want to do something that's universal and global, which we really feel like should be the ambition if you're doing mass communication, you really need to have some way to like break free from that. So again, having New York is really helping us to do that, so we can introduce the great stuff of Japan, but also giving the opportunity of like a global project or just global talent network that you can tap into.
Probably I might be the kind of first test case as a kind of export or
Export.
Japanese making course, and so for me it's totally different from this guy, and because he's been in the United States and in his childhood, and
I cheated, yes.
He's cheating actually. And I've been in Japan. I've been in Japan for 37 years, and since 3 years ago, I've been here for just 3 years. And so he talked about the difference, and he talked about how can I say Japan is this, and America is this, and I didn't have any space to think about that kind of thing. I just struggled for 2 years, and of course, as you know, the most difficult thing is language barrier. And I struggled to kind of overcome this language barrier for 2 years, and I didn't have any space. And So for 37, so since I started to work in, so as you said, so sometimes in the advertisement industry, initially I started to work as an advertisement guy, and but I worked in a very huge hierarchy, and I was too familiar with Japanese industry's hierarchy, and but after moving here, I have to survive as just a craftsman because I need to. Yeah, I can't speak and I can't communicate 100% accurately with American people, and so I need to fight with my just kind of my hand and what I can make with hand, and so.
At least to these.
Yeah, yeah. So that kind of struggle was here, and I didn't have any space to think about the difference. And but I'm so glad to find that. So my craftsmanship and skill as a craftsman is working in this country. Yeah, as the same as in Japan. So
maybe it's the difference, but also the commonalities or like the crossovers, I think.
Is your office here mostly Japanese or is it mixed?
It's mixed, okay. Yeah. It's like a 50-50 ratio now, I guess. We tend to hire like Japanese. We try to avoid them, but they're really good. You know, it's so hard to resist. It's like, oh my God, you're so good, but damn, you're Japanese. But alas, you know, we're now like, okay, we'll just take you in for your talent and whatnot.
And with that in mind, you know, in the presentations, Hiroko, we saw your work with Fendi. So obviously, today we work in such an international, global world. With that kind of culture and with the internet, do you think that these distinctions and these differences will matter as much in the future? Do you think that place will be important, an important part of the artist or creative's experience?
今高橋ひろ子というブランドでイギリスの会社からホームプロダクツのブランドを発表してるんですけれども、彼らにとっては、ね、私の日本人らしいデザインが彼らは求めているっていうのをすごく感じるんですね。
So currently, with my brand, Takahashi Hiroko, there's a company in England which has home products that they're putting out under my brand's name. And what they really wanted from me was my Japanese-ness. That was the sense that I felt.
でも実際のところ私は自分が日本人であるっていうことを意識してデザインをしたりものづくりをしたことがずっとなかったんです。
However, in all of my designing up until now, I never had the sense that I was Japanese as I was carrying out my work.
10年前にイタリアのプロダクトデザイナーのエンツォ・マーリさんという方とお仕事をしたんですけれども、
10 years ago, I had a chance to work with Enzo Morrison, an Italian producer.
彼にすごく巨匠なんですけれども、もう80半ばぐらいの方なんですが、彼にお前のデザインは日本的すぎるから、それはクッションカバーを彼の家具に合わせて作った時のものだったんですけれども、日本的すぎるからそこを脱しなければグローバルに活躍できないっていうふうに叱られたんですね。
At the time, he's an older gentleman. He's somewhere in his 80s. We were working on cushion covers together. What he said to me was that my designs are too Japanese and that it would be a hindrance if I wanted to do anything globally.
でも私自身は全く意識をしていなかったので、海外の人から私のものを見た時にそれがすごく日本的だったのであれば、私の中から自然に醸し出される輪なのかなっていうふうに認識して、それであれば私はもう自分らしく自分のやりたいことをやっていけば、それは必然的に日本が表現できるのではないかなというふうに考えるようになりました。
But I had never actually had the sense of that before. It took someone from outside Japan, a foreigner, to say that I had this in me, this Japanese-ness. But I thought to myself, if I finally became aware of this, that this natural Japanese-ness was in me, I could make it my own. And this is something that would just naturally or essentially be a part of my expression as a Japanese.
なので外の人から、日本の外の人たちから求められているものが、すごく日本的なものだっていうふうに感じながらも、私はそれを意識せずにものづくりをして、でもそのものづくりをするためにはやはり日本を拠点にしていかなければいけないのかなというふうに私は思っています。
So when working with foreigners, what they really want is my Japanese essence. This is something that I really felt. However, it's not something that I am aware of or really perceiving as I'm doing my creations. But I think that I do have to keep Japan as my base in the process of making things.
And that's really interesting. Before we turn it over to the audience, I want to ask you, Paul, the same question. You've kind of had a real nomad's life, starting in Australia, living in Amsterdam, and now based here in New York, having your second book come out about Japan. What is your perspective on the relationship between creativity and physical space? And also, why choose Japan for your first location-focused book?
Well, that's easy. Japan is my favorite country, and I wanted to explore it. I feel like I never really get to know it, and I always feel that surprise when I go back, so I keep on going back. And I thought this was the perfect opportunity to go back and do a book and try to learn a bit more about Japan. And for your first question, I think it's probably a bit of a disappointing answer, but I feel like all spaces across the globe that I've shot feel somewhat, there's something similar and something different about all of them, actually. And I was thinking about this as we're talking, like what is the difference between, let's say, Japan and other countries I visited in terms of space? And probably not a lot, probably a bit smaller maybe, that might be it, but definitely more quiet. So I found that the Japanese working environment is much more quiet overall compared to, say, other places that I've been. People just put their head down and get stuck into work more so.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to do an analysis of what is, like I noticed that every design studio you go to, everyone seems to have this area-aware wooden robot, at least on one desk.
Oh yeah, always.
And there's always like the same books that everyone has, and that might be interesting to see.
I got so sick of seeing IKEA shelves that I just avoided photographing them now. So it doesn't look like no one has IKEA shelves anymore, but actually they're in almost they're ubiquitous in almost, those tall boys, those white ones. I just hate them. So I just avoid photographing them completely now. But but often there's lots of trinkets and I like little details. So I have to go right in to make sure you can't tell that it's on this particular shelf.
Well, I noticed that like in your New York office, all the contractors in New York, they must buy the same globe lamps at Home Depot. Because we had the same like globe lamps in the
That's
in the
true.
studio.
Yeah, finding like an average studio design would be very interesting.
Yeah.
And so we've got just about 5 minutes left, but afterwards we will go to a reception where I hope we'll all continue this conversation in person. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists today?
Yeah, this is for Paul. I was curious to know, you mentioned this was the beginning of maybe a series of books.
Yeah.
If you could maybe let us know like what other areas or places you're considering to do. And also, you've done this over a period of years, have you experienced sort of a change in how people do interiors, in terms of like the popularity, a rise of, say, Airbnb, so you can, see like how there are certain things that might trend and there's like a global look. You mentioned like the IKEA shelves and all that stuff.
So the series idea is, I guess I'm just going to start with either practical or favorite or just historical. So it'll probably be the US next, just because I live here. And also in some ways there's always like a little ulterior motive to what, like doing it. Like Japan, I just wanted to spend more time and try to understand it. And then for the US, I realized I don't understand the US anymore, so I really want to explore the whole country. That would be really interesting. And that won't necessarily come into the message of the book, but at least I'm going to be on that journey trying to understand. And then probably Amsterdam, just because Frame are there and I lived there for a long time, and I think there's a lot of amazing creative going on out of Amsterdam. Maybe Italy next, I don't know, because my dad's Italian. But and then the second question was
trends that you've noticed in office design.
That's a tricky one.
Whether it's becoming more similar.
Well, obviously, besides the IKEA thing that I keep on seeing everywhere, I think probably more to the point, it's like when I go to a new country and I'm photographing a new studio, and this is a weird detail, but like the switches that they use. And I think, oh, wow, it's such a cool switch. And then, you know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks in of traveling through that city, I'm like, oh, that switch is just everywhere. And that's often what happens. And I think, oh, I want to buy that switch and have it at home. But not so much in a kind of a broader, I guess they're also studios, so they're not really public facing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's always like, Kissel's Kramer is a studio I've done out of Amsterdam. And they kind of pioneered this sort of idea of the outside inside of the log cabin coming inside, and this it looks like you're in the Alps actually, but you're inside an old church, and you know that was. Might be a little trend I'll see in like, or more to the point, I should say that in advertising agencies, you'll get this sort of this very kind of extreme zany rooms that they'll build out just to kind of counterpoint everything else that's going on. More that I see across like agencies or graphic design firms, more than a trend in style or something like this.
Please, before we begin the reception, join me in thanking Paul and our panelists, and also our hosts, Japan Society.
Thank you, Heather.